The other quarterback in this draft, who is very good, his name is Drake Maye. He goes to North Carolina. He is kind of, I don't want to say he's getting underrated or anything like that, but he is kind of getting a little bit forgotten about. And, more people are talking about the receiver we mentioned earlier, Marvin Harrison and everything. And, when people are, I guess, tanking, because you're not tanking, but I guess, like kind of setting up their team for the future a little bit, because, now we are in week 10. We talked about a little bit last week that you kind of know which direction you're going in. And for those who are kind of like, stripping the team a little bit, trying to, get the highest draft pick that they can. If you're not going to get the first pick, maybe someone has already been tanking. Fine, got it. But second overall, people are thinking take Marvin Harrison Jr. And we discussed him about a month ago, a little longer than that maybe. He's very good receiver, very safe receiver. We talked about how he's going to be valued very highly in Dynasty. But no one's really talking about or considering Drake Maye at 2 overall. And to me, I think like it's not going to be for everyone, but there's going to be some leagues where like he could be going 1st overall ahead of Caleb Williams. Like he's on that type of level as far as, again, landing spot's going to be huge, right? So if Caleb Williams does not go to like the most optimal landing spot, and let's say Drake Maye goes to a team that has, maybe a team trades up that's, already kind of set up on offense or something like that. Maybe Drake Maye, at least the talent-wise, he's close enough to where if the situation becomes better, I would have no issue. Like I would probably, advocate for him going 1st overall. Why is that? Right? Well, I'm just going to go right to the comparisons because, I think that's just the easiest way for most people to kind of visualize and understand what we're dealing with here.
Like me.
He's going to get, he's going to get compared to 2 guys a lot. It's going to be Trevor Lawrence. It's going to be Justin Herbert, okay? Trevor Lawrence went 1st overall in the draft. Justin Herbert, 6th overall. Trevor Lawrence 1st overall in the 2021 draft. Herbert 6th overall the year prior, 2020. And I believe that Drake Maye is going to fall somewhere in between that. So again, I do think Caleb Williams ends up being the 1st overall pick in the NFL draft. I just think that that generational hype and everything is going to take him over the top. But I don't see Drake Maye falling out of the top 5, for example. Well, I guess top 4, honestly, because we talked about the tackle and whatnot. And what we're going to see here is as we, continue moving on from this, the evaluation is going to be very similar to the draft capital, right? So Trevor Lawrence, best draft capital. Justin Herbert, projected worst, quote unquote, draft capital, but still very good. And then Drake Maye somewhere in between. Kind of the same thing as a talent. Let's get right into it. Scroll down a little bit here. Basically, look, let's first see why they're similar, right? And it's really, they look the same. Like all 3 of these guys, when you see them on a football field, they look the same, right? I know the height and weight's a little bit different. Okay, Drake Maye is the shortest guy, but he's a little bit thicker, I guess, at least compared to Trevor Lawrence, who's more of a slender. He's not skinny by any stretch of the imagination, but he's definitely more of a thinner build compared to the other 2 guys. Justin Herbert, just the largest guy in general.
Herbert looks skinny though, but weight could be a little, it could look so different on so many. Like Kamara looks skinny, but he's extremely powerful.
And that kind of leads into my point. Like even though they all are, slightly different heights, different weights, they really look the same. And they really all just strike people as that, I'm going to use that buzzword, that prototype passer. You know what I mean by that? Like 6'5", 6'6".
Not Bryce Young or
not Bryce Young, and not even like Lamar Jackson types, right? Like we're looking more like a Joe Burrow with a little bit more mobility, even maybe, right? So again, I kind of told you earlier, Trevor Lawrence 1, Drake Maye 2, Herbert 3, as far as when they were going to get drafted in the NFL, like pick slot, right? So when we're looking at the pedigree, that kind of also matches, right? Trevor Lawrence, generational prospect. Next, Andrew Luck, John Elway, Peyton Manning. Those were the names that you heard with Trevor Lawrence, if you remember that. Justin Herbert, more of a polarizing guy, right? But he wasn't, he was still drafted very early, 6th overall. That's nothing to, nothing to snooze about.
Most people had him as a bust that I talked to.
Yeah, a lot of people had him as a bust, and he was very polarizing. And we'll get into, the why on that. Drake Maye, not as polarizing, right? He's not exactly a generational, heralded as like a generational or a transcendent type guy, okay? But he's also not going to be as polarizing as Justin Herbert, to the point where, like, everyone's going to say the consensus is going to be that he's the QB2. He's very good. Obviously, where the consensus might be different is, are you going to take Marvin Harrison or Drake Maye or Caleb Williams? That might be where people differ. But no one's going to disagree that he's good versus bad, or the QB2. There might be like that 1%. That's about it, right? So he's pretty much stable. And the point is that his pedigree is basically somewhere in between Trevor Lawrence and Drake Maye. So now if you move on to the arm talent, and arm talent kind of is like combining everything, I guess, into one thing for now. Of course, we're going to talk about Drake Maye in even more detail, as the season ends and get some film and everything, really get into the nitty gritty. But, for now, it's just more like an introduction type of thing. So when we're looking at arm talent, we're looking at stuff like, arm strength, of course, ball placement, accuracy, stuff like that. Being able to layer throws. We've talked about that time and time again on this podcast. And, the reason why Trevor Lawrence was considered a generational prospect at the quarterback position is, largely because of the arm talent. He can make all of the throws. He's got good awareness, good anticipation, all of that type of stuff, right? With Justin Herbert, it wasn't really like the arm strength that was an issue. It was really two major things. Actually, I'll say three, but one of them, well, let's talk about the third one first. That's not really as, it was kind of dispelled, right? The whole thing where he was like shotgun versus taking snaps under center, that ended up being kind of a debate for a little bit during the pre-draft process. Turns out that was just all of us overthinking completely. But the two main issues with Justin Herbert, as far as the arm talent would go, is number one, he would at times, it's just like, he would make 6 really good throws in a row, okay? And then he would just miss badly on the 7th one. Not even close, just complete miss, just a complete dud. And that would happen like routinely. So it's not like, it's like a one-off or like one bad pass per game. It was literally like, okay, 3 to 4 to 5 really, really good throws, and then just one dud. 3 to 4 to 5 really good throws, another dud. And it's just like, it happens so often. It's like, can we fix this? Can we eliminate this out of your game completely and, elevate you and get you to that superstar level? And obviously the Chargers have done a good job with that. The other thing is the anticipation, right? So we're looking for college guys to throw their receivers open, right? Like, it's one thing where you're accurate and you hit your guy in the hands, and you make a catch, throw a catchable ball and whatnot, right? But that second level, getting to the NFL, being a high draft pick, being successful in the NFL and all that stuff, it's about throwing your receivers open too, right? So like, on a route where maybe like your receiver's running a flat route, okay? You want to throw the ball outside, kind of aiming out of bounds to a spot where only your receiver can catch it and the defender, for example, cannot, right? That's an example I think that everyone here can visualize. That's kind of what I mean by, throwing it to your receiver, throwing your receiver open, throwing a safe ball and everything, right? So the anticipation coming into the NFL, kind of a knock on Justin Herbert, right? Drake Maye does not have these issues, okay? what Drake Maye's issue is, and that's going to lead into the next kind of category here, is the mechanics, right? I talked about this a little bit with Trey Lance. Trey Lance had not the best footwork. His front foot would not be, in place, stable, and would not be pointing towards the target. The way I like to think of quarterback mechanics, Couch, is basically pitching in baseball, right? Because pitching in baseball is basically the ideal throwing motion. Obviously, when you hear like a commentary, like they'll say the kick and the pitch, right? So you get that leg kick from the pitcher, then the leg will go and the foot will point towards home plate, and that's exactly where they're throwing. The pitcher can get good torque with the hips, and then can get the good wind up and everything, and it's basically the perfect throwing motion, right? With Trey Lance, he basically would not step towards home plate. Think of it like he would be stepping towards first base and throwing at home plate. Not the best. Obviously, that's an exaggeration, but not the best way to throw it. With Drake Maye, he does not have a wide enough base to him, right? So I want you to think of when a pitcher pitches, he lifts up his leg and then he really extends his front foot, right? So when he puts it back on the ground, it's way out in front of him. He's like in a full extension. His arms are out wide, and he's going for his windup, right? With Drake Maye, the base is a little bit narrow, okay? What does that lead to? Why is that a problem? The problem is, well, now it's going to lead to when he's got to move around in the pocket, at least the crossing feet. The one thing that is an absolute no-no in football is crossing feet. You do not cross feet. Think about it like this, right? If you cross your feet, how easy is it for someone to knock you down? Much easier than if you had, your feet stably firm with a good foundation, good base, right? Also, another thing, when you have a narrow base, it's tougher to move around. Also, not just about the whole crossing feet thing, but just in general to move around and manipulate the pocket and all that stuff. And again, it's not that Drake Maye is immobile. We'll get to that in just a second here, but he's lacking in that footwork. He's lacking in that foundation and that base. And that is probably going to be the number one priority for his future NFL coaches to work on, in my opinion, right now. I think everything else is pretty good. I mean, yes, there's a lot of things he can get better at, sure. But, as far as like what needs the most work, I think it's going to be the mechanics, specifically the footwork and the base / foundation, however you want to word it. With Justin Herbert, again, his knock was not really about mechanics. It was more on the, anticipation and the just missing one throw often type of stuff. But, his mechanics were not perfect. Still could use some work. While Trevor Lawrence, on the other hand, again, one of the reasons why he was heralded as a generational quarterback prospect. Very good mechanics, A+ mechanics, right? Now, the last category we're going to get into, and this is more important for fantasy football than real football, though it is, nowadays with the era that we live in, it's definitely important for both, right? We're going to talk about mobility. Now, look, I'm going to start with Trevor Lawrence because I have him ranked as compared to these three quarterbacks. I have him ranked the lowest. He is still pretty mobile, okay? So that's what we're dealing with. When it comes to mobility, we're really kind of splitting hairs here. So Trevor Lawrence, 3, still very mobile. The reason why I'm going to put Justin Herbert at 1 is because he's by far the most athletic guy of the 3, I think. I think it's pretty, as far as like the athleticism goes, it's a pretty significant difference between Justin Herbert and Drake Maye, who would be somewhere in between as far as mobility and everything. Trevor Lawrence and Herbert. And again, we're splitting hairs, so it's really close, but I think I'm going to give the nod to Justin Herbert there. And that's probably why, Couch, we see Justin Herbert having more success than Trevor Lawrence. I mean, I get the team, Keenan Allen, much better receiver than whatever the Jaguars have right now in total, like as far as their wide receiver 1 goes. Eckler, but Travis Etienne, so that kind of cancels out. So, obviously I guess you could say the weapons, like the top end weapons for Chargers might be better. Okay, but really, I think what it could come down to, I don't have data to support this, right? But I'm just basing this off the skill set. I think maybe Justin Herbert's a little bit better than Lawrence right now because of that mobility and that how that equates to the athleticism.
It's probably also pass attempts.
Pass attempts too? Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, because it's hard to compare a quarterback on a balanced team versus a quarterback who's on a team that usually is like top 2 in pass attempts, because they haven't had a rushing attack since Melvin Gordon was is in the second year, the Chargers. So it's been a while. Eckler's more of a pass catcher than a rusher.
Well, so is ETN supposedly,
but ETN's the rushing this year though. So
yeah, that's true though. You're right.
Yeah,
you're right.
It's a balanced attack. I think. I mean, I don't like. We can bring that up. I'm sure because Herbert's always leading the league or top 2 in the league in passing.
He's always passing like 40 times. I have him in one fantasy league. He's always passing a ton. So I don't doubt that at all. I think you're right.
I mean, I think that's what it is. Yeah, and then I guess the mobility a little bit. I think he played 3 sports in high school. I think he was a triathlete. Yeah, I mean
that definitely translates for sure.
That explains. I think T-Law is very mobile too. He's very athletic, but just not as athletic as Herbert.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So that's basically why I've got 1 versus 3, and then Drake Maye falls somewhere in between, right? So the bottom line here is that you can look at this in total here, and you can see Trevor Lawrence, he's basically first place, if you will, in 3 of the 4 major categories, while Drake Maye is second place in 3 of the 4 major categories, right? So you can kind of get an idea that okay, as prospects, obviously NFL success is kind of reversed, right? Because as prospects, Trevor Lawrence, amazing. Justin Herbert, 50-50, maybe even less. As far as the NFL production goes, it's kind of flipped, where it's like, Trevor Lawrence, I still love him, obviously, but, as far as the production goes, it's very inconsistent, up and down right now, while Justin Herbert, fantastic. But as far as what they look like as prospects, Drake Maye just kind of falls somewhere in between these guys, right? So these are 2 really good quarterbacks. These are top 7, top 8, Trevor Lawrence and Herbert, as far as how the Dynasty community is valuing these guys. And, if Drake Maye falls somewhere in between those guys, man, I mean, I understand the argument for picking Marvin Harrison Jr. because a lot of guys I do see in Dynasty leagues, they are picking Justin Jefferson and they are picking the Bengals, what's his name? Jamar Chase. They are picking those 2 guys, ahead of guys like maybe not Jalen Hurts anymore, maybe like a Justin Fields, for example, who, entering the year had some hype around him. Trevor Lawrence, for example, right? So I do see that from time to time. So it's not like you cannot pick Marvin Harrison over Drake Maye. I'm not saying that at all. But I think it's a little bit closer than what people are kind of making it out to be right now. And I think people got to respect Drake Maye just a little bit more. They already are respecting him. They're not disrespecting him, but got to put a little bit more respect on his name, put him in that category with Caleb and Marvin Jr.